The massive chamber of the Galactic Council had never been this quiet before. Usually, hundreds of different alien species would be chattering, clicking, or humming in their various languages. But today, everyone sat in complete silence as an old speaker system crackled to life with a desperate message from across the galaxy. Ambassador Veltar, from the Kythera Coalition, stood in the center of the room, and he was clearly terrified. His body was made of some kind of living crystal that normally glowed with beautiful colors, but right now those colors were flickering like a broken light bulb. His hands were shaking so badly that other council members could hear the tiny crystalline pieces of his fingers clicking together. 12 worlds, he said, his voice barely louder than a whisper. 12 entire planets, completely destroyed. The Vexi swarm came out of nowhere and just ... ate everything. Every tree, every animal, every person. They turn it all into more of themselves, like some kind of horrible virus that consumes planets. Instead of bodies, the other aliens in the chamber started making worried noises. Some of the bird-like species ruffled their feathers nervously. The slug-like creatures secreted stress hormones that made the air smell sour. Everyone knew about the Vexi swarm, but hearing that 12 worlds had fallen was worse than anyone had imagined. Council Speaker Mordain, large octopus-like creature with purple skin, raised several of his tentacles in the air. The tentacles were moving in sharp, jerky motions that showed just how upset he was. Our military forces tried to stop them, he said, his voice filled with shame. We sent our best ships, our most advanced weapons, our smartest commanders, but these bioships, they learn from every attack. What works today becomes useless tomorrow. They adapt faster than we can fight them. The chamber erupted in panicked chatter. Representatives from dozens of species started talking at once, their voices mixing into a cacophony of fear. Some were suggesting they should evacuate entire sectors of space. Others wanted to build massive defensive barriers. A few were even talking about surrender. Then, from the back corner of the chamber where the newest members sat, came a voice that cut through all the noise like a knife. It was rough and harsh, with strange sounds that made some of them more sensitive. Species actually flinched backward in their seats. The voice belonged to something that most of the council members had never heard before. "We got your message," the voice said simply. Everyone turned to look. And there stood a creature that looked almost primitive compared to the advanced aliens around her. She walked on 2 legs, had strange hair growing from her head, and wore simple clothes instead of the elaborate ceremonial gear that most ambassadors preferred. This was Jiwan Park, the human ambassador. It's representing a species that had only recently figured out how to travel between stars. Most of the council members knew almost nothing about humans except what their science teams had told them.
Earth.
The human homeworld was classified as a Class 12 death world. That meant it was so dangerous that most galactic species couldn't even visit it without dying within hours. The gravity was too strong, the radiation too intense, the weather too violent, and the native life forms too aggressive. It was the kind of planet that the galaxy used as a dumping ground for toxic waste, assuming nothing could possibly live there. G1 walked forward with confident steps, her boots making sharp clicking sounds on the crystal floor. She didn't seem intimidated by being surrounded by hundreds of alien beings, many of which were much larger and more technologically advanced than she was. Veltar's crystalline form brightened slightly with hope. You'll help us? Your people will send aid? Juan nodded once, a quick, sharp movement. Fleet Admiral Minho Kim is putting together our response team right now. We'll be in your system within 72 hours. The council members looked at each other with confusion and, if they were being honest, a little bit of amusement. They had expected that maybe humans would send a small cargo ship with medical supplies or food for refugees. After all, what could one primitive species possibly do that the combined military might of hundreds of advanced civilizations couldn't accomplish? The Galactic Council had technology that could move stars, weapons that could crack moons in half, and computers that could simulate entire universes. What could these newcomers from a toxic death planet possibly contribute to solving a crisis of this magnitude? But there was something in Jiwan's voice, something in the way she stood and spoke, that suggested the humans had a very different idea of what aid meant. The other council members would soon discover that when humans heard about an extinctionally level threat consuming entire worlds, they didn't think about sending supplies or offering shelter to refugees. They thought about sending something much more dangerous than the HFY swarm had ever encountered. They thought about sending themselves. Admiral Minho Kim stood on the command deck of the UES Incheon, looking out through the massive viewing windows at a sight that would have terrified most alien species. Dozens of human warships were appearing. Out of nowhere, materializing from fold space, jumps around Earth's orbital shipyards like metal predators, answering a call to hunt. These weren't the sleek, elegant vessels that other galactic civilizations preferred. Human ships looked like they had been through hell and back because they literally had. Every single hull was covered in scars, dents, and patches from humanity's brutal expansion through their own solar system. The armor plating was thick and ugly. Designed not for beauty, but for survival against things that would instantly kill crews from more civilized worlds, the reinforced hulls could withstand radiation levels that would cook most alien species alive within minutes. The weapons systems looked primitive and crude to galactic observers, but they had been tested in the most violent environments imaginable. These ships had fought through solar storms that could melt metal, navigated asteroid fields where a single mistake meant death, and operated in gravity wells that would crush vessels built by gentler civilizations. "Give me a status report," Minho ordered, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had commanded ships through impossible situations and brought his crews. Home Alive Commander Suman Lee walked over to him with the precise movements of a career military officer. She had spent the last 3 years hunting pirates in the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter, fighting battles in conditions that most galactic species would consider a death sentence. Her uniform was crisp and professional, but her eyes held the hard look of someone who had seen real combat. "Third Fleet is fully assembled and ready for deployment, sir," she reported. 47 vessels total, ranging from heavy cruisers to fast attack corvettes. 18,000 Marines are aboard and equipped for full combat operations. All ships have complete deployment packages loaded and ready. Minho nodded as he studied the tactical display that showed the positions of all his ships. These weren't just any soldiers and sailors. These were veterans who had survived some of the most brutal conflicts in human history. Some had fought in the Venus atmospheric wars, battling in an environment where the air was pure acid and the pressure could crush submarines. Others had served in the ice mining conflicts on Europa's moons, where one small mistake could send you floating into space or crushed under shifting ice mountains that weighed millions of tons. To most galactic species, hostile environments were something to be avoided at all costs. But to humans, hostile environments weren't obstacles to overcome. They were just another Tuesday. These people had grown up in conditions that would kill most aliens instantly. And they had learned to not just survive, but thrive in places where survival seemed impossible. Lieutenant Hyun-woo Nam, who was monitoring communications from his station across the bridge, suddenly looked up with a confused expression on his face. "Sir, we're getting some interesting questions from the Galactic Council observers who are monitoring our preparations. They're asking why we're loading so many kinetic artillery weapons and assault equipment onto our ships. They seem confused about why we would bring heavy combat gear to what they're calling a humanitarian mission." Several other officers on the bridge turned to look at their admiral, wondering how he would respond to what was obviously a cultural misunderstanding. The aliens clearly expected humans to show up with medical supplies, food rations, and maybe some transport ships to help evacuate refugees. They had no idea what humans actually meant when they said they were coming to help. Minho's smile was the kind that would have made a shark proud. It was the expression of a predator who had just spotted prey and was looking forward to the hunt. "Tell our galactic friends that humans always come prepared for any situation. When we heard about an enemy that consumes entire worlds and adapts to every weapon used against it, we decided to bring some weapons they've never seen before." The truth was simple, but terrifying. When humans heard about the HFY swarm, destroying 12 worlds and threatening to consume entire civilizations, they didn't think about rescue missions or evacuation plans. They thought about war. And when humans went to war, They brought everything they had learned from surviving on the most dangerous planet in the galaxy. The HFY swarm was about to discover why Earth was classified as a Class 12 death world, and why the creatures that crawled out of that hell had become the most dangerous predators in the galaxy. The human fleet burst out of fold space at the edge of the Kythera system like a pack of wolves emerging from a dark forest. The transition from faster-than-light travel to normal space created massive energy discharges that lit up every sensor in the area, announcing their arrival with the kind of dramatic flair that made alien observers nervous. Captain Su-Yang Choi stood on the bridge of her destroyer, the Yuz Guangzhou, watching her sensor displays with the calm focus of someone who had navigated through Jupiter's radiation storms for fun. What she saw on those screens told her everything she needed to know about the people they had come to help. Thousands of refugee ships were fleeing from the inner planets, and they were the most delicate-looking spacecraft Su-Yang had ever seen. They looked more like floating works of art than actual starships. The hulls were made of some kind of shimmering crystal that caught and reflected light in beautiful patterns. The designs were elegant and graceful, with flowing curves and intricate decorations that spoke of a civilization that valued beauty and harmony above all else. "Captain, I'm reading the structural integrity of those refugee vessels," reported Ensign Yemen Shin from his tactical station. "They're barely holding together. These hulls are so thin and delicate that they wouldn't survive 5 minutes in Earth's radiation belt. A solar flare would vaporize them instantly." It was becoming clear that the Kythera had evolved on a very different kind of world than humans. While Earth had beaten its children into shape with deadly radiation, crushing gravity, violent weather, and predators that could kill you in 1,000 different ways, the Kythera homeworld had apparently been a gentle paradise, where the biggest concern was probably making sure your art projects turned out nice. Suddenly, a priority transmission crackled through the communication system. The face that appeared on the main screen was unlike anything most of the human crew had seen before. The alien was beautiful in an otherworldly way, with skin that seemed to be made of living light and large, expressive eyes that held a kind of innocence that spoke of a species that had never really known true hardship. "Human vessel," the Kythera captain said, speaking in heavily accented Standard Galactic. His voice was musical and soft, like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "We are grateful for your arrival, but we must express concern. Our instruments are detecting radiation levels around your ships that should be lethal to any known life form. How do you survive such exposure? Are your crews already dead?" The human bridge crew exchanged looks that ranged from amused to incredulous. What the Kythera were detecting as lethal radiation levels was actually just the normal background radiation that existed everywhere in space. To humans, this was like worrying about the sunlight coming through a window on a cloudy day. "From Earth," Su-Yang replied simply, as if that explained everything. And in a way, it did. "This radiation level is completely normal for us. We actually consider this a pretty mild environment." The alien's expression slowly shifted from confusion to something that looked like a mixture of awe and primal terror. His large eyes grew even wider as the implications of what he was hearing began to sink in. These weren't just another spacefaring species with slightly different technology. These were beings who treated lethal radiation like a pleasant spring breeze, who considered environments that would instantly kill most galactic life to be mild and comfortable. "The HFY swarm," the refugee captain continued, his voice now trembling with a new kind of hope, mixed with fear. "They are unlike anything the galaxy has ever faced before. They learn from every attack. They adapt to every weapon. Then, hours of first contact, our most advanced weapons become completely useless against them. They consume everything organic and convert it into more of themselves. Nothing can stop them." Su-Yang's smile was the kind that would have made a great white shark nervous. It was cold, calculating, and filled with the confidence of someone who had spent their entire life fighting things that most people couldn't even imagine. "Well then, it sounds like the HFY haven't met humans yet." The truth was becoming clear to everyone on both sides of this conversation. The galaxy was filled with species that had evolved on gentle worlds, where cooperation and peaceful coexistence were the keys to survival. But humans had crawled out of a hell world where everything tried to kill you every single day. They had learned to not just survive, but to enjoy the challenge. The HFY swarm was about to discover the difference between fighting civilized species and fighting something that evolution had specifically designed to be unkillable. Admiral Minho Kim stood in the war room of his flagship, staring at a three-dimensional hologram that showed the most terrifying enemy humanity had ever encountered. The image floating in front of him looked like something out of a nightmare. The HFY bioships were enormous living creatures that had been turned into weapons of mass destruction. They pulsed and writhed in space like gigantic parasites, their organic hulls breathing and shifting as if they were still alive, and they were still alive. These weren't machines built in factories. They were evolved predators that had been specifically designed by evolution or genetic engineering to consume entire worlds. Each ship was covered in what looked like skin and muscle tissue, with massive mouths that could swallow smaller vessels whole and digestive. Chambers that broke down everything they consumed into raw materials for creating more of themselves. "Reconnaissance mission completed, Admiral," reported Commander Yoon Ji-yu, whose voice was coming through the communication system from her stealth corvette, the EU Soul. She had spent the last 12 hours sneaking around the edges of the HFY fleet, using every trick in the book to avoid detection while gathering intelligence. "I can confirm that these things are definitely biomechanical hybrids. Right now, they're strip mining the 4th planet in this system, and it's the most horrifying thing I've ever seen." The hologram shifted to show real-time footage of what was happening on the planet's surface. Massive tentacles, each one the size of a skyscraper, were reaching down from orbit and literally scooping up entire cities. Forests, mountains, oceans, and billions of living creatures were being sucked up into the bellies of the bioships, like food being eaten by some cosmic monster. "They're converting every single organic molecule into new swarm units," Yunji continued, her voice tight with controlled anger. "At their current consumption rate, I estimate they'll achieve critical mass for system-wide consumption within 48 hours. After that, they'll have enough resources to build a fleet capable of consuming the entire sector." Minho nodded grimly as he studied the tactical data. The Galactic Council had provided him with records of their previous attempts to fight the HFY, and those records painted a picture of complete military failure. Every conventional weapon that the galaxy's most advanced civilizations could bring to bear had proven useless against these creatures. Traditional energy weapons, like lasers and plasma cannons, were simply absorbed by the bioship's organic hulls and converted into energy that made them stronger. Missile attacks were intercepted by specialized defensive organisms that grew out of the ship's skin like antibodies fighting off an infection. Even the galaxy's most sophisticated artificial intelligence systems had been overwhelmed and shut down by the swarm's collective intelligence. The HFY operated as a single, massive brain spread across thousands of individual ships. When one part of the swarm learned something new, every other part instantly knew it too. It could adapt to new threats faster than most species could even understand what was happening. "Sir, there's something else you need to know," said intelligence. Officer Dong Yoon Ko, stepping forward with a tablet full of analysis data. "I've been studying the neural patterns of the HFY hive mind, and I've discovered something interesting. Their adaptation algorithms are specifically designed to counter what we might call civilized warfare." Minho raised an eyebrow. "Explain." "They've evolved to fight enemies who follow rules," Dong Yoon explained. "Species that try to minimize collateral damage, that use precise surgical strikes, that attempt to negotiate or find diplomatic solutions. The HFY have learned to counter elegant tactics, sophisticated strategies, and advanced technology. But their patterns suggest they've never encountered anything like Earth-type opposition." A slow smile spread across Admiral Minho's face, and it was the kind of expression that would have made a tiger nervous. The galaxy was full of species that had evolved on peaceful worlds where survival meant cooperation, where conflict was resolved through negotiation, and where warfare was conducted according to strict rules designed to minimize suffering. But humans had evolved on a world where survival meant fighting every single day against predators. Diseases, natural disasters, and environments that actively tried to kill everything that lived there. Humans didn't fight according to rules. They fought to win no matter what it took. They're about to learn the difference between fighting civilized species and fighting something that crawled out of hell, Minho said quietly. The Vexai think they understand warfare because they've been beating up on species that play by the rules. But humans wrote the book on survival at any cost, and we're about to give them a pre-education they'll never forget. The war room fell silent as everyone absorbed the implications. The galaxy was about to witness what happened when an unstoppable force met something even more dangerous. The attack began at exactly 4 in the morning. Ship time, when most of the galaxy's civilized species would normally be sleeping peacefully in their beds. The Vexai swarm had grown comfortable and overconfident after consuming 12 worlds without facing any real resistance. Their bioships drifted lazily through space, focused entirely on the strip mining operation happening on the planet below. The swarm's sensors had detected the human fleet hours ago, but they had completely dismissed the newcomers as just another pathetic rescue attempt. After all, they had already crushed the combined military might of dozens of advanced galactic civilizations. What could one primitive species from a backwater death world possibly do that the galaxy's finest hadn't already tried? They were about to find out just how catastrophically wrong that assumption was. Captain Giwan Han's assault frigate, the Yuz Busan, came screaming out of the darkness like a bullet fired from the hand of an angry god. The ship was moving at velocities that should have turned any normal crew into a thin paste spread across the back walls of their bridge. But humans weren't normal. They had evolved under Earth's crushing gravity, and their bodies could handle acceleration forces that would instantly kill most alien species. The nearest Vexai bioship was a massive creature, the size of a small city, its organic hull pulsing with the rhythm of a gigantic heartbeat. It had tentacles that could wrap around entire buildings and a mouth that could swallow battleships whole. To the swarm's collective intelligence, this single bioship was more than capable of handling whatever primitive weapons these new aliens might possess. The bioship barely had time to register that something was wrong before the Busan opened fire with weapons that the galaxy had never seen before. Instead of fancy energy beams or sophisticated missiles, the humans were using something almost insultingly simple: kinetic penetrators. These were nothing more than tungsten rods, each one about the size of a telephone pole, that had been accelerated to significant percentages of light speed using magnetic railguns. The physics were brutal and unavoidable. When something that heavy hits something else while moving that fast, nothing in the universe can stop what happens next. The tungsten rods punched through the bioship's organic armor like bullets going through wet paper. The creature's natural defenses, which had easily absorbed the energy weapons of galactic fleets, were completely useless against simple chunks of metal moving at relativistic speeds. "Direct hit confirmed," shouted Weapons Officer Yunabei from her station, her voice filled with savage satisfaction. "Their bioarmor isn't designed to handle kinetic impacts at these velocities. That thing's hull just got turned into confetti." On the bridge of his flagship, Admiral Minho Kim watched the tactical display with the cold satisfaction of a predator who had just proven that his hunting strategy was superior. While the Galactic Council was still debating evacuation routes and discussing defensive positions in committee meetings, humanity was doing what it had always done best: attacking the problem head-on with overwhelming violence. The human fleet, deployed across the battlefield with mechanical precision that would have impressed a Swiss watchmaker. Every ship knew exactly where it needed to be and exactly what it needed to do. There was no hesitation, no second-guessing, no committee meetings to discuss the best approach. When humans identified a threat, they killed it. It was that simple. Vexai bioships began to react with the speed that had made them so terrifying to other species. The swarm's collective intelligence immediately started analyzing the new threat and developing countermeasures. Within minutes, the bioships were growing thicker armor plating, developing new point defense organisms that sprouted from their hulls like cancerous growths, and adapting their energy absorption systems to try to handle kinetic impacts. But adaptation takes time, even for a hive mind that could think at the speed of light. and time was the one thing that humans absolutely refused to give their enemies. "Second wave, launch immediately," Admiral Minho commanded, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had spent his entire life turning impossible situations into victories. "Show these parasites what Death Worlders do to existential threats." Galaxy was about to learn that when humans went to war, they didn't just fight to win. They fought to make sure the enemy could never threaten anyone ever again. Major Jinwoo Park and his Marines were about to do something that no other species in the galaxy had ever attempted. They were going to board a Vexide bioship and fight the enemy on their own territory. As their assault shuttles approached the massive organic vessel, Jinwoo could see his target through the reinforced windows. The bioship looked like a nightmare come to life, its hull breathing and pulsing like the skin of some gigantic monster. "Cutting through the hull now," reported Corporal Byamju Lim as he pressed his plasma torch against the bioship's outer skin. The torch burned through the organic material like a hot knife through butter, sending up clouds of steam that smelled like burning meat. Most alien species would have been horrified by the sight and smell. But humans had been butchering animals for thousands of years. This was just another day at the office. The Marines moved through the breach wearing full environmental suits that could keep them alive in the vacuum of space. Their armor was designed to handle everything from radiation exposure to acid attacks. Because Earth had taught humanity that you never knew what was going to try to kill you next. As they pushed deeper into the bioship, alien observers watching through helmet cameras were amazed at how easily the humans adapted to zero-gravity combat. "These humans fight in zero gravity like they were born in space," whispered one Cathera, military observer, to another. How is that possible? The truth was that humans had been training for zero-gravity combat ever since they started expanding into their solar system. Earth's children had learned to fight in the asteroid belts, on the moons of gas giants, and in the empty space between worlds. While other species treated zero-gravity as a dangerous obstacle to be avoided, humans had learned to use it as a tactical advantage. "Internal atmosphere is methane-based," reported Sergeant Minji, song over the communication system as her squad pushed deeper into the bioship's pulsing corridors. The walls around them were made of living tissue that contracted and expanded like the inside of a giant lung. Toxic to most known species, would kill anything that breathes oxygen within minutes. "Good thing we brought our own air supply." Major Jinwoo replied calmly as he led his squad through corridors that looked like the inside of a giant digestive system. The Marines' environmental suits recycled their oxygen and filtered out toxins, allowing them to operate in environments that would instantly kill most galactic life. But the real surprise came when the humans began deploying weapons that no other species had even thought to use. They started releasing specially modified Earth bacteria into the bioship's atmosphere. These microorganisms had evolved in Earth's primordial soup billions of years ago, surviving and thriving in conditions that would sterilize most worlds. To the Vexhi's organic systems, these Earth bacteria were like a plague that their immune systems had never encountered and couldn't fight. "Biological warfare is showing immediate effectiveness," reported Dr. Sungwon Choi from his mobile laboratory. "Their organic components are breaking down faster than they can regenerate. It's like their immune system doesn't even recognize our microorganisms as a threat." Lieutenant Taiyan Zhang's engineering team was working on an even more devastating surprise. They had been analyzing the Vexhi's hive mind communication system and had made an incredible discovery. "Sir, their collective intelligence operates on frequencies that are almost identical to Earth's social insects like ants and bees. I think we can disrupt their coordination using modified counterswarm algorithms." The implications were staggering. Humans had spent centuries studying how to disrupt insect swarms on Earth, learning how to confuse ant colonies and break up beehives. Those same techniques, enhanced with advanced technology, could potentially shatter the Vexhi's greatest advantage, their ability to think and act as one unified intelligence. "Deploy the disruption signals," Kinwoo ordered as his Marines fought their way toward the bioship's central nervous system. "Let's see what happens when we turn their own biology against them." This was the moment when the galaxy began to understand. What made humans so dangerous? Every other species had evolved on worlds where life was relatively easy and cooperation was the key to survival. But humans had evolved on a planet where everything tried to kill everything else, every single day, for billions of years. They had learned warfare from fighting microscopic bacteria, plant toxins, viral infections, parasites, predators, and environmental hazards most galactic species couldn't even imagine. Now all of those lessons were being applied against an enemy that had never faced anything like Earth's evolutionary pressure cooker. For the first time in their expansion across the galaxy, the Vexy swarm was beginning to retreat. The final phase of the battle began when Admiral Minho Kim decided it was time to stop playing games and show the Vexy what human warfare really looked like. He had been holding back his most powerful ships, waiting to see how the enemy would adapt to humanity's initial attacks. Now that he understood their capabilities and limitations, it was time to commit his reserve forces and end this fight once and for all. The EU's Daegu, along with her sister ships, formed the spearhead of humanity's most devastating assault. These weren't just warships. They were floating fortresses that had been designed to survive in the most hostile environments imaginable.
Alice.
Their hulls were built to withstand the radiation from solar flares, the crushing pressure of gas giant atmospheres, and the impact of asteroids traveling at thousands of miles per hour, as the human fleet pushed directly into the heart of the Vexy formation. The bioships unleashed everything they had. Streams of bioacid that could dissolve most metals splashed across the human vessels like rain hitting a windshield. Organic projectiles that had torn through galactic warships bounced harmlessly off the reinforced armor. Energy weapons that had previously been absorbed and converted by the swarm's biotechnology were simply shrugged off by hulls that were designed to handle the raw fury of stars. Hull integrity holding at 97%, reported Chief Engineer Young-Soo Lee from his station deep within the Daegu's armored core. He had spent the last 15 years maintaining ships that operated in environments where a single system failure meant instant death for everyone aboard. To him, the Vexy's attacks were barely worth mentioning. These bioweapons hit about as hard as a solar storm during a quiet period. Our armor isn't even getting scratched. But the real shock came from what was happening on the planets below. Colonel Seon Choi had led her ground forces directly into the most heavily infested worlds, places where the Vexy had been consuming everything organic for weeks. These were environments that should have been completely uninhabitable for any normal species. The atmosphere was filled with toxic gases that would dissolve lung tissue within minutes. The gravity had been artificially increased by the bioship's modifications to crush any resistance. Radiation levels were high enough to fry electronic equipment and cause immediate cellular damage to most galactic life forms. It was the kind of environment that other species would consider a death sentence, but to humans, this was just Tuesday. They had evolved on a world where every breath of air could kill you, where the radiation from their own sun was constantly trying to give you cancer, and where the gravity was strong enough to crush most alien visitors. Colonel Seon's forces moved through the infested landscapes, like they were taking a casual stroll through a park. Human ground forces have successfully pushed past the primary hive cluster, transmitted Kithara Observer Commander Velcor, his voice filled with a mixture of awe and primal terror. They're fighting in conditions that would kill our soldiers instantly, and they're not just surviving, they're winning. They're using weapons that appear primitive by galactic standards, but the effectiveness is beyond anything we've seen. The truth was both simpler and more terrifying than the aliens could understand. While the galaxy had developed sophisticated energy weapons and complex missile systems, humans had never forgotten the basic principle that sometimes the best way to kill something was to hit it really hard with a big piece of metal. Their primitive projectile weapons were actually precisely engineered instruments of destruction that could punch through almost any defense. But more importantly, humans had learned to kill on a world that had been trying to kill them every single day for millions of years. Earth had taught its children to fight everything from microscopic viruses to massive predators, from poisonous plants to natural disasters that could level entire continents. Every single challenge that Earth had thrown at humanity had made them stronger, more adaptable, and more dangerous. The HFY swarm had evolved to consume civilized worlds inhabited by gentle species that had never really known hardship. But humans weren't a civilized species in the galactic sense. They were apex predators that had crawled out of hell itself, and they had learned to hunt everything that had ever threatened them. To the humans, the HFY weren't some unstoppable force of nature. They were just another predator that needed to be hunted to extinction. And humans had thousands of years of experience in making dangerous things extinct. The final HFY bioship died like a wounded animal, crashing in space as Captain Hyansu. On's destroyer, the UES Inchin, delivered the killing blow. The massive organic vessel had been trying to escape, its living hull pulsing frantically as it attempted to regenerate the damage that human weapons had inflicted. But there was no escaping the focused plasma beam that burned through its central nervous system like a laser through butter. The bioship's death was almost pitiful to watch. Its tentacles went limp, its breathing stopped, and the bioluminescent patterns that had covered its hull flickered once and then went dark forever. What had once been a terrifying predator capable of consuming entire worlds was now just a floating corpse drifting through the vacuum of space. Across the entire Cathera system, similar scenes were playing out as the last remnants of the HFY swarm were systematically hunted down and destroyed. Human forces had proven themselves to be not just effective, but absolutely devastating against an enemy that had seemed unstoppable just days before. The creatures that had consumed 12 worlds and threatened to devour an entire sector of the galaxy had been completely eliminated in less than 72 hours. All threats neutralized, Admiral Minho Kim reported to the Galactic Council, his voice carrying the calm satisfaction of someone who had just completed a routine maintenance task. The Cathara system is now secure. We're beginning cleanup operations, and we'll have a full after-action report within 24 hours. The silence that followed his transmission was so complete that you could have heard a pin drop in the council chamber's light years away. The assembled representatives of hundreds of civilizations sat in stunned quiet, trying to process what they had just witnessed. They had watched in real time as humanity demonstrated military capabilities that completely redefined their understanding of what warfare could be. These weren't just another spacefaring species with slightly different technology. These were apex predators that had been unleashed on a galaxy that had forgotten what true conflict looked like. While other civilizations had spent thousands of years developing diplomatic solutions and peaceful coexistence, humans had spent the same time learning how to kill things that were trying to kill them. Ambassador Veltar of the Kithara Coalition was the first to break the silence, his crystalline form flickering with emotions that ranged from overwhelming gratitude to barely concealed terror. His voice trembled as he spoke. Every word carried the weight of someone who had just witnessed something that would haunt his dreams for the rest of his life. "We are eternally in your debt," he said, his musical voice cracking with emotion. "Our entire civilization owes its continued existence to your intervention. But we must ask, and please forgive our curiosity, where did your people learn such methods of warfare? How did you develop tactics that could defeat an enemy that has destroyed everything in its path?" Commander Suman Lee, who had recently been promoted to serve as humanity's liaison officer with the Galactic Council, stepped forward to answer the question. Her response was delivered with the kind of simple honesty that only humans seemed capable of, without any attempt to soften the implications of what she was saying. "We learned everything we know from Earth," she said, her voice carrying the matter-fact tone of someone explaining basic mathematics. "Every single day we survived on our homeworld was a lesson in how to fight, how to adapt, how to overcome impossible odds, and how to turn disadvantages into advantages. The conditions that you consider to be warfare, we consider to be a normal." Tuesday afternoon, the revelation hit the council like a physical blow. Earth wasn't just a class 12 death world. It was a training ground that had spent millions of years forging the most dangerous species the galaxy had ever encountered. While other worlds had produced artists, philosophers, and peaceful explorers, Earth had produced warriors who treated extinction-level threats as interesting challenges. The galaxy would never look at humans the same way again. They were no longer seen as primitive newcomers who might eventually become useful allies. They were now recognized as something far more dangerous and far more valuable. They were the sword that the galaxy could diswield against the darkness that lurked between the stars, and everyone understood that the age of gentle diplomacy was over. 6 months had passed since the Vexi swarm was completely eliminated from the Kythera system, and the galaxy was still trying to understand what had happened. The council chambers had been rebuilt and expanded to accommodate humanity's formal induction as a full-member species. But the ceremony taking place today felt fundamentally different from any that had come before. Ambassador Giwan Park stood at the center of the Great Hall, surrounded by representatives from hundreds of civilizations. But the atmosphere was unlike anything the galaxy had experienced in thousands of years. There was respect, certainly, and gratitude for humanity's role in saving countless lives. But underneath those positive emotions was something much more primal. The recognition that the galaxy's most dangerous predators were now sitting at the same table as everyone else. The aliens looked at Giwan and her human delegation with the same mixture of awe and instinctive fear that ancient prey animals might have felt when looking at a pack of wolves. They were grateful that these predators were on their side, but they were also acutely aware that everything had changed forever. Council Speaker Mordain, his purple tentacles moving in formal ceremonial patterns, made the announcement that would reshape galactic politics for generations to come. By a unanimous vote of this assembly, we hereby establish the Human Defense Corps as the primary rapid response force for existential threats to galactic civilization. When diplomacy fails and conventional forces prove inadequate, humanity will serve as our sword and shield against the darkness. The implications were staggering. For the first time in galactic history, one species was being officially designated as the military protectors of everyone else. It was an acknowledgement that humans possessed capabilities that no other civilization could match, and that sometimes those capabilities would be the only thing standing between survival and extinction. In the months following the Vexi conflict, other species had begun desperately studying human tactics, trying to understand how beings from a single world had revolutionized galactic warfare in a matter of days. The answer they discovered was both simple and terrifying. Most of the galaxy had evolved on paradise worlds where cooperation and mutual aid were the keys to survival. These garden worlds had produced species that were naturally inclined toward peaceful coexistence, diplomatic solutions, and scientific advancement. Their civilizations had grown through trade, cultural exchange, and the gradual expansion of knowledge and understanding. Conflict, when it occurred, was resolved through negotiation and compromise. But humans had evolved in hell and learned to make it their home. Earth had taught its children that survival meant constant struggle against everything from microscopic diseases to massive predators, from toxic environments to natural disasters that could wipe out entire continents. Every single day of human existence had been a lesson in adaptation, aggression, and the ruthless application of violence when survival was at stake. Admiral Minho Kim, now bearing the newly created title of Supreme Defense Coordinator, stepped forward to address the assembly. His words carried the same direct, uncompromising tone that had become humanity's trademark in galactic politics. "Galaxy is under our protection now," he said, his voice carrying across the vast chamber with absolute authority. "Any force that threatens peaceful species, any enemy that seeks to consume or destroy innocent civilizations, will discover what it means to face Earth's children. We will hunt them down, we will outfight them, and we will make them extinct before they can harm anyone else." As the ceremony concluded and the alien representatives began filing out of the chamber, their emotions were a complex mixture of relief and apprehension. They were undoubtedly safer now, protected by beings who treated impossible odds as interesting challenges, and who had proven capable of defeating threats that had overwhelmed the combined might of galactic civilization. But they also understood that the galaxy's long age of gentle diplomacy was coming to an end. Humanity had arrived with the knowledge that sometimes the only way to deal with an existential threat was to unleash something even more dangerous in response. The peaceful galaxy would never be the same, now guarded by warriors who had climbed out of hell itself and learned to call it home. The age of humanity had begun, and with it came the promise that the innocent would be protected and the guilty would face justice delivered by the most dangerous species the universe had ever produced. For better or worse, the galaxy now had guardians who understood that peace was only possible when those who would disturb it knew they faced immediate and overwhelming retaliation,